So on this job, we're working on time, and this guy says, I'm going to be here all day long, so if you need anything, that'd be great. And I said, well, if you're going to be home, you want to help me haul brush, that'll save you a lot of time, and we'll get a lot more work done. And he just laughed at me. He went in the house. He's a young guy, too. He's probably about 60. And he's just been sitting there on his computer all day long, just dicking around. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder. Once or twice a year, I get somebody say, yeah, I'd like to help out. And it's always nice, you know, when the property owner wants to work on their own property. So I'm out in the front yard, and if you look at it from this perspective, you can see where the tree was just rounded over at one time. And all the new shoots came out in multiples everywhere, but they're growing off of really rotten areas. So the decision on this tree, you know, the guy says, well, you're the arborist, tell me what I need to do. There's no good answer. There really isn't. I hate working on a tree that's been screwed up by some past climber that didn't know what they were doing. So I want to show you the quality of some of this wood up here and how weak it is and how unsafe our tie-in and our support in the tree is. Poor Jorge up there, he's just clipping away and realizing everything is hollow. So we're making some big decisions. We're looking at each of the branches, and if they look like they're too far gone, that whole limb is just an obvious choice. We have to take it out. Even though there's a lot of green foliage on it, the weakness on that whole limb is unacceptable. So the job isn't really about fixing the tree. It's more about making the liability of these extreme weaknesses less of a liability. So all said and done, you know, we took a lot out of the tree, but honestly, I think this tree is in its last days. And there was so much that we could break. We had the fence underneath us. We had a lot of nice plants. We had 2 yards to deal with. We had 2 air conditioning units that we had to be careful of. And, you know, we've got so many rotten branches up here. Things are just falling out as we're working. I mean, look at that mess. That's a disaster. So do you see this flat spot right here? That's from an old pruning wound. And that pruning wound just got worse and worse and worse and opened up the entire limb to decay. Another lousy aspect of the silver maple is when you're pruning them, everything hangs up. It's just a nightmare to get stuff out of the tree. We were trying to retain that lower limb there for balance, and I tell you, we finally got it out of there. You know, Jorge had to start the chainsaw up and pick at it. I've still got it tied in, but there was nothing I can do. When he made the cut, it just hung up instantly, you know. Sometimes you can let it fly and you can use the momentum and the weight of the branch to let it fly out of the tree. But in this case, everything was hanging up. So this is what the tree looked like when we got there, and this is what it looked like when we finished up the day. Still a presentable tree, but we got all the really dangerous stuff out of there. There's another tree decision on yet another job. This Chinese pistache was only planted 5 years ago, and it's starting to crack the brand new hardscaping that they just spent a fortune on. And it was the landscape company that did the planting of this tree right next to the concrete that they installed. So I advised him, I said, if you leave this tree grow in another 5 years' time, it's going to cause so much damage to your cement that it's going to be a much bigger expense. And they put lights in the tree to light up this little patio area. So the guy said, okay, let's get rid of it. And I said, well, what about the lights? And he says, well, I'll figure that out. And I said, well, how about if I just leave the trunk? I'll cut it at the base 90% of the way and make it so it's strong enough to support the pole until we're ready to do it. And he agreed. I had the second pistache, which is also a very young tree, and it's barely getting started. It's going to be huge. Now, check this out. Here's another job. I was across the street from where I was at. This is a maple. I'm not sure what species of maple it is, but I wanted you to check out the extensive decay. Look at this. I know silver maple rot's really bad. This is not a silver maple. It's also rotting really bad. The wires are supporting that branch. It's sitting on the telephone wires up there. This was the job that we had across the street from this mess of a maple. We had 2 really tall crepe myrtle trees that had been butchered a few times in the past. And wherever they made a cut, multiples came out. They had a beautiful Japanese maple in her yard as well. Lucy trimmed this last year, and I advised the woman to pull all of the foliage away from the base of this tree because she's got lots of stuff, and she's watering everything to keep it nice and green. And a thin bark tree is very susceptible to basal crown rot. And I didn't see any in there, but I didn't pull all this stuff back. She said she was going to have her gardener do it. But really important that you don't keep foliage growing up around any tree, but a thin bark tree like a Japanese maple is particularly susceptible to rapid decay. And you wouldn't see it. You'd see the foliage being nice and green, but then all of a sudden the tree would start dying. So here's the 2 crepe myrtles. This was kind of a job that I was very uncomfortable with because we had to bring it down because of all the excessive weight up there. And I told her, I said, these trees are going to look terrible. And she says, that's okay. Let's get them brought down. And basically, we were starting over. So I almost cut the trees in half. Experience yesterday. I was in the bucket, and I had the bucket extended straight out as far as I could go on the side of the truck. And I was working, and all of a sudden, I heard a loud pop and a big crack, and the bucket started to tip over. Instinctively, I pushed the top arm and pushed it so it dropped down really quickly. And it turns out the main support bracket for one of my outriggers cracked and broke and snapped. Let me show you. So this is the main support for my outrigger. This keeps my truck from tipping over. And what I had to do is I rigged up a come-along and pulled it so I could pull it back together as close as possible because it was separated by about an inch. And I took it down. I had a buddy, and I said, hey, I'm in trouble. And I paid him to do this for me, but he took it right away. So I went down to his shop, and he welded it all up for me. It's probably stronger than the previous weld. But as you can see, this is how this outrigger works, and it puts an awful lot of pressure on this one welded joint right here. I feel very, very fortunate that the truck did not tip over because I had so much side leverage, but it felt like it was going. The truck was tipping, and oh, thank God. So let's talk about metal fatigue. I've had a number of times in my life where something has failed miserably, and this is one. I blame myself. I should have paid closer attention to it.